Do you see all the Wailers as being a sort of family because of all those?
Well, it has been. It has become a family because with Robert and myself sharing the same sister, it makes Ziggy calling me uncle. Steve, all of Robert's children I'll be their uncle. And Peter got my sister pregnant, Shirley, who is my first sister. Andrew Tosh is my nephew. So if my sister is the sister of Pearl and all of that, so Andrew calls Robert's children cousin, and the same, and aunts and nieces and nephews. That's what the Wailers family have become. The Wailers have become that kind of a family.
Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. If you're a bit confused by Bunny Wailer's brief breakdown of the Wailers family tree, trust me, you are not alone, as that Trenchtown trio has one of the most intertwined stories in reggae history. On this channel, we've covered some intriguing personalities and connections in that dynasty, like Constance Marley, Bob Marley's elder sister, and Pearl Livingston, Bob and Bunny's sister. But I have to say, the most mysterious figure of them all has to be the little-known Shirley Livingston, the first daughter of Bunny's father, Thaddeus Livingston, and Bunny's older sibling. Unlike the other Wailers sisters, who had little contact with their famous older brothers, Shirley was a prominent presence around the trio as they hustled their way to national fame on the tough streets of Trenchtown. It was in those formative days that she and Peter Tosh started a relationship which incidentally grew closer and hotter while Bunny was locked up in prison for 18 months for marijuana possession. Peter and Shirley became an item in Trenchtown, practically living together like man and wife at a point, and together had Peter's first child, Andrew Tosh. And though she was Peter's first love, their relationship would be hit by many storms, including the turbulent radical lifestyle that the Stepping Razor was swept away by. Her tale was quite difficult to research about, as there is very little information about her on the internet. But now, without further ado, let's take a look at the untold story of Shirley Livingston, Peter Tosh's first wife and Bunny Wailer's elder sister. She was born in 1945 in Kingston, Jamaica, the very first child of Thaddeus and Margaret Livingston, who over the next 2 years had two boys, in first son Carl Livingston in 1946 and Neville aka Bunny in 1947. Not too long after Bunny was born, the family moved to the village of 9 Mile in the St. Anne parish, and she and her brothers would attend an all-age school in the nearby town of Stepney. It's not very clear when their parents broke up, but by 1962, Margaret Livingston had left the family, and a woman called Cedella Marley, who was Bob Marley's mother, was then with Thaddeus and was pregnant with Pearl Livingston while managing his grocery store and rum shop. That was the period of Jamaica's independence, and the Livingston family, along with thousands of others, migrated from the countryside to the capital of Kingston in search of better opportunities, with Cedella and young Bob Marley in tow. The family would settle on 2nd Street in Trenchtown. By then 17-year-old Shirley had finished school, and in the absence of their mother, helped keep her younger brothers on the straight and narrow path and out of trouble, as their new neighborhood was simply crawling with rude boys. Bob and Bunny, who were crazy about music, soon made friends with a tall, handsome youth named Winston Hubert McIntosh, who was also an aspiring musician. The trio became inseparable and often rehearsed in the front yard of the Livingston home and formed a group called the Wailers under the tutelage of a man called Joe Higgs. Naturally, with Peter always around and something of a ladies' man, he got very friendly with Shirley right around the time the guys blew up with their debut single, Simmer Down, that went to #1 in Jamaica's charts. The pair became a couple in 1966, at a very tough phase in the Wailer story. They had by then parted ways with Studio One and were trying to find their feet as independent artists. A few months later, her brother Bunny was arrested in Trenchtown during a raid by the police and was wrongly imprisoned for marijuana possession. It was while he was in jail that Shirley moved in with Peter and took their relationship to the next level. And less than a year later, they would welcome a baby boy that they named Carlos Andrew McIntosh in June 1967. Andrew's birth seemed to signal a breakthrough as Peter and Bob began to work for Jazz Records, owned by singer Johnny Nash and his manager Danny Sims, after being introduced to them by their spiritual mentor in Rasta leader Mortimer Plano. But on the flip side, it also saw Peter fall heavily under the influence of Plano's radical idealism in ways that began to put pressure on their relationship. The first example of this was when Peter got inspired by Plano to go and protest outside the police station in Denham Town over an event that just happened in apartheid South Africa. And resultantly, Peter got locked up and beaten by the police and was eventually bailed out by Shirley with the little money that she had. But that was just the beginning. Things ramped up dangerously over time as Peter's confrontations with the authorities escalated in frequency and intensity and reached its peak during the Walter Rodney riots in October 1968. Kingston was in turmoil as protests had erupted over the Jamaican government's oppression and victimization of Dr. Walter Rodney, a university professor and leading voice of the worldwide Black Power movement. The chaos spread quickly, and over in Trenchtown, the news was filtering into the ghetto. When Peter heard the news, he was excited and fired up as he was a keen follower of Walter Rodney's teachings and decided to go and join in the protests. Shirley begged him not to go, especially as their son Andrew was only a year old and she feared the worst could happen. But of course, Peter was as stubborn as a mule and didn't listen. He commandeered a bus, filled it with as many people willing to join him, and stormed the city center and looted a departmental store before driving back to Trenchtown. The riots died down by the next day, but that wasn't the end of it, as repercussions were about to follow. The most feared policeman in Kingston had gotten information about Peter's role in the chaos and stormed Trenchtown to find him and set a brutal example. So on Peter's birthday, October the 19th, 1968, he left his woman and infant son in Kingston and fled back to his hometown in Westmoreland, where he would lay low for 3 whole months, doing his best to avoid the law. Back home, no one had an idea where Peter was, and Shirley would hear terrible rumor after rumor of what might have happened to a man. Those were very tough days for Shirley, as her younger brother was in prison and her guy was dead for all she knew. But thankfully, Peter returned home in January the next year, and not long after, Bunny finished serving his prison sentence. But Shirley's joy didn't last for long though, as the Wailers' collaboration with Johnny Nash and Jad Records saw them touring often out of town, and to make matters worse, Peter was by then something of a magnet to the opposite sex. Being a very handsome, funny and talented musician, women literally chased him on the streets, and he also was drawn to them. And this all led to a massive strain in the relationship that in no time got to breaking point. It's not certain the exact period that Peter broke up with Shirley, but I estimate around the time the Wailers had signed for Island Records and were on a grueling tour of Europe to promote their album Catch a Fire. Peter had by then begun a relationship with a woman called Yvonne Whittingham, and his romantic bond with Shirley would finally end. She was said to be a very quiet and reserved person and kept far away from the public eye despite her famous family, and would dedicate herself to raising her son, Andrew, while Peter became a global superstar as a solo artist in the 1970s. In 1979, a then 12-year-old Andrew went to live with his father while attending high school at Duhaney Park on the outskirts of Kingston, while his mother reportedly left the city and moved back to their family home in St. Anne, where she reconnected with her family and other sisters. And this is where the trail of this mysterious lady goes cold, as she would totally shun the limelight, even as Peter's career skyrocketed, and her son Andrew followed in his father and uncle's footsteps, becoming a full-time musician in the 1980s. I find it really mind-boggling that she's been so difficult to trace, but I've heard 2 very popular accounts of what happened to her. The first one is that she passed away sometime in the early 2000s, and the other states that she's still living quietly with her sisters in 9 Mile, totally removed from the public eye and living a very quiet life. But neither of these are totally authoritative, so if you have any information about her, please leave it in the comment sections below.